Just want to welcome everybody. On behalf of the Darlington Volunteer Fire Company, I would like to let you all know that we appreciate you being here. Raise of hands, who was not here last year? Holy moly. That's good, because you wouldn't have been able to hear anything last year. I brought a speaker system out. One of the speakers ended up going bad. Half this thing you couldn't hear. We were yelling, it was outside. So Dave has made this so much better by moving it inside. We have Joe back there from All Day Live Audio, has donated his time and speakers so that you can hear what's going on. Thank him. Huge difference from last year already, because I can even hear me. That's good. So, everybody silence your phones. We got a great service getting ready to start. I don't want to hear any crazy Verizon ringbacks or anything like that. Just silence your phones. Let's have a good time. If you need a restroom, it's right over here to the right. If anybody has not seen these 13 chairs up front, if you don't know what those are for, you haven't been watching news, you haven't been online, it's not a bad thing. But this is where we were getting music coming from somewhere already. Yeah, it's August 26th, I thought. Yes. So on August 24th, 13 soldiers were killed evacuating the assets from Afghanistan, and we placed seats here for them. Dave's put a nice event together today, and I just want to thank him so much for all the behind-the-scenes work. He's got a great time. Dave is a past chief here, as well as everything else. He's done it all, and he's still doing it. So we appreciate him very much. For you that don't know, I'm Michael Wade, and I'm the president here. So if you have any questions, my vice presidents are out there. They can answer them. If we have an emergency, if you see any lights going off, blue or red, just stay where you're at. We'll be responding, and they'll get out of your way. Hopefully they won't trample on anybody. We'll send them out the back. But you'll get to see what happens when we have an emergency. If you live in this area and you're interested in helping out, we need all the help we can get. Any of the surrounding areas also need help. So this is a volunteer organization. Everybody that you see here is a volunteer, and they're giving their time to make sure we can protect the community and help. I had a whole bunch of things I wanted to say. I wanted to start off by this morning. We had over 1,200 motorcycles at our House 1. If you were able to participate in that, we want to thank you. Several large groups came. Also, the Hogs and Heroes were there, and we appreciate all the support that we get from everyone. That ride, I rode on that ride. It was amazing, very heartfelt. I've rode it several times and escorted it several times, but today really hit home. My wife got to be with me, and just the people telling you thank you. And the thing that hit hot the most with me is the amount of people that were on the side of the road with their flags that still remember. You know, a lot of people in this room weren't around 20 years ago. We have several young people, and some people don't remember where they were 20 years ago. I'm thankful for this piece of steel we have out here as a daily reminder, and we're allowed to come in and still keep doing what we're doing because of the people that are out there fighting for us every day. I'd like to hand this over to Dave Weiser. He's the master of ceremonies. He's got all this figured out, and if he doesn't, he's going to figure it out right now. Come on up, Dave.
Thank you, Mike. Welcome. Tonight, we will spend the next hour in remembrance, in celebration, and in ceremony. Let me explain. We will be in remembrance of the tragic events that happened 20 years ago on September the 11th, 2001. Those events changed our world. We will be in celebration of peace. What an amazing concept. Celebrating peace. That is how we can make ourselves, our homes, our community, and our world a better place. And finally, we will be in ceremony in the fire department traditional way. So with that, I would like to introduce and call on the Harford County Volunteer Fire and Ambulance, or EMS Association Honor Guard to open us.
Honor guard, attention! Shoulder arm. Color, forward, march. Colors, halt, left face. Colors, present, arms. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Colors, shoulder, arms. Prepare to post. Post. Ready, up. Present, arm. Order, arm. Colors, right face. Forward, march.
Thank you. You may be seated. How many of you remember what you were doing when you heard the news of the events of 9/11? We will never forget that moment. I'd ask you now to raise your hand if you are active or retired military. Please keep your hands raised. Please also raise your hand if you are active or retired law enforcement. Please keep them raised. If you are active or retired EMS, fire or rescue, volunteer or career, please keep them raised. If you are active or retired healthcare worker, please keep them raised. Active or retired civil servant, please keep them raised. Active as a volunteer of any kind in your community, please keep them raised. If you've ever donated blood, please keep your hands up. If you've ever helped a neighbor in need, you are the true heroes. Thank you for your service. I would now like to call on Matt Gullion, the pastor at Harvest Community Church.
I am a Christian. It just happens to be a police officer and a pastor. I joined the Darlington Fire Company back in 1997, and I volunteered for nearly 10 years with this awesome organization. And on September 11th, 2001, 20 years ago, it forced me to make a commitment for full-time service and a career. I just happened to fall into law enforcement. Anyone that knows me, I hope, comes across that I am full of hope. I'm full of optimism. Scripture tells us to be ready to give an account for where that hope comes from. It was in the police academy in 2004 that I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ. And life's never been the same. Down on the memorial wall in D.C. for law enforcement, it says, where there is valor, there is hope. Valor is courage, valor is strength. For some, they find it in worldly things. For me, I find it in spiritual things. So keeping that in mind, let's go ahead and go to the Lord in prayer and prepare our hearts and minds to pay remembrance to this day 20 years ago. Lord God, Father in heaven, you are a hallowed Father and you have a hallowed name. Lord, thank you for leading these people all here safely this morning. Lord, we know there is a lot of death and destruction, a lot of decay and chaos in this world. And Lord, a lot of people question your love because of these things. Lord, 2,000 years you demonstrated your love through Jesus Christ. He is our blessed hope and assurance today. So Lord, as we think of the 20 years that have passed, 20 years since that dreadful, tragic day, the lives lost, the lives impacted, Lord, let us also ponder on the mental health needs of these folks that have surrounded themselves with 20 years of trauma. The families that continually to fight diseases and cancers. An evil that still remains in this world, Lord. Attacks all around the world because people believe in something greater than life itself. But that which they believe is evil and destructive. So, Lord, let us not be evil and destructive. Let us cling to the power that's in you. Let us humble ourselves this evening and pay tribute to the time that's been lost, but also the time that's been gained. Because in every loss, if we just look deep enough, we can find a gain. Lord, soften our hearts that we may never forget and always live to serve others as we'd like ourselves to be served. For it's in Jesus Christ's holy and precious name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Matt. There are many great lessons that we can learn from music. One of those lessons is peace. In 1971, John Lennon released his iconic song, Imagine. Part of the lyric goes, "You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday that you'll join us and the world will be as one." I'd now like to call on Susan Fisher, a lifelong peacemaker, to light the peace candle. Thank you, Susan. How many of you have visited the memorial site in New York? Okay, please keep your hands up. The Pentagon Memorial, Shanksville, Pennsylvania. I highly encourage you to visit all three. On September the 11th, 2001, our first speaker found herself in the middle of the terror and confusion of the World Trade Center. Her story of bravery, strength, and intelligence is inspiring. Amy Andrews spoke here 10 years ago today when we dedicated this very fire station. I would like to now welcome back Amy Andrews.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Amy. I survived 9/11. Before I begin my story, I want to sincerely thank all our first responders and all our military members, past and present. They are truly an inspiration to us. Because of their courage and selflessness, they've shown us what it means to be an American. They define the term home of the brave. They are heroes who make us feel protected, gave us a sense of security, safety, and provide us service where they put others first. It's unfortunate at times when we lose one of our courageous heroes in the line of duty. We must never forget them. They deserve our deepest respect, honor, and compassion. I came to America when I was 10 from Singapore. I became a US citizen years later, and I went to college for pre-med. But my passion was acting and modeling. I starred in an independent film called Miss Wonton and traveled around the world to premiere my movie. I felt I was moving closer to my goal as an actress. While pursuing an acting career, I felt I needed steadier income. So I worked at the front desk associate at the World Trade Center Marriott, which is Building 3, connected to the North Tower, through a big revolving doors, and adjacent to the South Tower. The day of September 11th, 2001, was my first encounter with the firefighters. I was in the lobby when I heard a very loud explosion. Sounded like a bomb. The whole building shook, and then the debris started falling everywhere outside. We heard the North Tower just got hit by a plane. One of our bellmen came running in to tell us to call 911 because a lady just got third-degree burn. Her hair and clothes were burned onto her. We started evacuating all guests in the hotel. A manager asked if someone could go to the basement to assist a female security officer named Maggie, answering incoming calls. I volunteered. When I went to meet downstairs, she says, "Why are you still here? Go, leave." I told her, "I'm here to help." We are answering and transferring calls left and right, letting them know that we all are evacuating all our guests. Then we got a call. The South Tower also just got hit by another plane. Suddenly, we can smell an unusual scent surrounding us. A security guard came to tell us to go back upstairs to the lobby to be safe. By the time we got to the lobby, almost everyone had evacuated except some of our managers, and the lobby was filled with 50 to 60 firemen. A manager told Maggie and I to evacuate, and of course, we stayed because we needed to help the firemen. They used our lobby as one of their command stations and needed to call out for help, and I knew the passcode to call out for an outside line. And I also knew which rooms still have disabled guests that needed to get them down. Firemen were running in and out. You can see the fear and horror in their face. They told us not to look outside because bodies were landing everywhere, and a fireman just got killed by a fallen body. We could hear the sound of the bodies landed on the hotel roof and out on the street. The fireman was so exhausted and dehydrated, so we ran around passing bottles of water, not knowing that one of the most horrific events was about to occur. A fireman came running in through that big revolving door from the North Tower, yelled, "Run! The building is coming down!" Maggie and I grabbed each other's hand and turned to the right. But everything happened so fast. The building trembled. Everything turned pitch black. We can hear the floor collapsing on top of us, causing pressure to split our hands and lifted our feet and blew us across the end of the building. During this, death passes by. My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't see because of the pressure. All I thought was, I didn't tell my loved one I loved him. I don't want to die this way. I couldn't see where I was landed, and I could feel the debris landing around me. And I kept praying that nothing will land on me. Then the collapse stopped. The world stopped. Was I still alive? Then I heard and felt a fireman next to me getting up. I grabbed him, but I couldn't get up. My shoes were stuck in the debris. So I tried to wiggle it out of them, and it was now barefoot. He turned his helmet light on to see and to try to find exits. Maggie saw my shadow call out my name. We grabbed each other once again. A fireman said, "This way, follow me. Turn to the left, turn to the right. No, I think someone just fell in the hole." He could see some daylight and possibly an exit out. We had to climb 4 stories high of debris. And when we got to the top, we looked down. My bare feet were shaking because I was so scared to climb down all those broken beams and debris. What if I slipped? I could easily fall into the hole. I got 2/3 of the way down, and a man helped me down the rest of the way. I looked in horror. The place was like a Steven Spielberg movie. Everything was white. Cars' windows were broken, cars on top of cars, crushed ambulance, fire trucks. I have no time to wonder what just happened. All I wanted to do is just to get out of there. Only a few of us walked out from the first collapse. We walked a few blocks down south for safety, and a few moments later, heard someone yell, "Run!" Again, we were running out of our lives. Seeing the big dust clouds trying to engulf us, the second tower had collapsed. We found out that one of our managers, who was only 10 feet away from me, ran a different way, got trapped by 2 firemen during the first collapse. They were badly hurt and could not find an exit out. After the second collapse, there were no words coming out from them. Till this day, his body was not found. The reason why some of us were saved after the first collapse was because we were blown to an area that was reinforced during 1993 World Trade Center bombing. So it did not collapse all the way completely. But after the second tower came down, it flattens everything. This event scarred me for life. I wonder, why was I spared? I decided to give back. I wanted to do something bold, something courageous. I wanted to help people. 3 months later, I put my acting career aside and joined the United States Air Force. I got stationed at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware and practiced physical therapy. My job was to rehab those who suffer injuries. Dover Air Force Base is the home of the Department of Defense mortuary. All our fallen military members, heroes from overseas, are sent to Dover, where mortuary prepares them to be sent home with full honors funeral. The mortuary was extremely busy during that time because we were fighting 2 wars. The mortuary dentistry department was so overwhelmed, x-raying our fallen heroes' teeth, or in some cases, whatever is left of them. I volunteered to help, and that was not easy to see. It hit me hard because I had to see bodies, which brought back memories of 9/11. but it needed to be done for proper identification. During my time in the Air Force, I was also handpicked to serve as a member of the Dover Air Force Base Honor Guard. We honor all our fallen heroes from war and to send them home properly and proudly. We as Honor Guard can't show emotions. We had to hold our sadness inside our heart, especially when we carry our fallen heroes off the plane. Day and night, rain and shine, and in the freezing cold. I remember one night we had to carry 48 fallen heroes. It was such a heart-wrenching experience that I'll never forget. My enlistment in the Air Force lasted 4 years. During that time, I met my husband. We left Dover. We moved to Harford County, Maryland. Today, I work for the Harford County School System, providing PT services to students with disabilities and developmental delays. Looking back at 9/11 and my time in the military, these extraordinary situations make me a different person. I look at life differently. What I learned and realized is that I love to help people and touch as many lives as possible. I learned not to take any day for granted and to tell my loved ones I love them as often as possible, because you'll never know what tomorrow will bring. I thank you for listening to my story today. It is an honor to be invited here to speak. Let's never forget what happened to us that day and how strong it made us as a country. It united us in a way that we can never be broken, and nothing can ever break our resilience. With that being said, I'm truly proud to be an American. Love, peace, thank you. I just want to thank my husband for preparing the slideshow, but it's not too dark, so it doesn't show up as is. He was prior military police officer and as well as a squad leader for the Dover Air Force Base Honor Guard. Maggie, please stand up. She is a security officer I mentioned in the speech. We escaped from the first collapse, and we're now best friends for the past 20 years. Thank you.
Amy, on behalf of a grateful audience, thank you. Thank you, Amy. Do you remember September the 12th, 2001? American flags everywhere. People holding doors for complete strangers. Lines of people waiting to donate blood, and money pouring in from all over the world. People wanted to do something to help. But the search for survivors and the victims continued at all three sites. Let us remember the victims that were lost on September the 11th, 2001, and those that have been lost to the effects of that terrible day with a moment of silence. Following our moment of silence, Katie Gath, an award-winning trumpeter, will play taps. Thank you, Katie. In the hours, days, weeks, and months after 9/11, thousands of first responders, law enforcement, and contractors arrived at the crash sites. Slowly, carefully, debris was moved, inspected, investigated, and labeled. Thousands of people that were doing this work were all being exposed to the particles of hazardous products, the off-gassing from smoldering fires that were still burning, and debris. From this, we learned of the catastrophic consequences of working the pile. The casualties from these attacks would continue to grow even to today. The crash sites were considered to be crime scenes. The FBI sent many special agents to assist with the investigations. One of those agents, Lauren Schuler, is here to share her story of determination, focus, and healing. Her grit is amazing. Please welcome Lauren Schuler.
Thank you. Thank you to my cousin Dave Weisert for inviting me to speak this evening. And thank you to my husband Todd and my son Matthew in the back, who are also here to hear me speak for the first time. So as Dave just introduced me, I'm Lauren Schuler. I'm a retired FBI agent. I worked there for over 20 years in the Baltimore division, and then an extra 2 years at FBI headquarters. I'm so happy to be here this evening, seeing you all in person, not only because of COVID, but also after my own personal health crisis, which resulted from my being deployed to the Pentagon on 9/11 as a member of the FBI's Evidence Response Team, or ERT for short. So for the next 20 minutes or so, here's what I'm going to talk to you about. First, a little about my deployment to the Pentagon on 9/11 and in the weeks that followed. I want to convey how the toxic air and environment affected my health and that of other first responders. I'll tell you a little bit about the blood cancer called multiple myeloma. And lastly, I will tell you about my goal to find a cure for this cancer and to inspire people to live their best life. First, my assignments in the weeks after 9/11. As you all know, on 9/11/2001, American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m. At 10:10 a.m., a 100-foot section of one of the Pentagon's outer walls collapsed. The fires were actually uncontrolled until 6 p.m. the following day on the 12th, with fires continuing to smolder and reignite during the next week. There were 189 fatalities at the scene, 64 passengers and crew on the airplane, and 125 in the building. There continue to be additional fatalities to date of first responders, Pentagon employees, and people who live nearby from illness related to the toxic air quality. Our ERT was deployed to the Pentagon the evening of 9/11. We checked into a hotel in Roslyn and reported to the scene early the next morning. I was assigned to the day shift, working 12-hour days from the 12th of September until approximately the 16th of September. The environment featured strong odors, fumes from jet fuel, and smoldering debris unlike I had ever smelled before. The air contained toxic fumes, dust, and asbestos from the collapsed and burning building. Most first responders, except for the trained firefighters and contractors, remained outside the building on the first day due to the extreme hazards inside. The smoky haze extended well outside the area surrounding the Pentagon, even into Roslyn, where we were staying. Personal protective equipment, or PPE as we call it, those first few days was completely minimal. It consisted of basic medical masks, like these, like what we wear today for COVID. We had hard hats, steel-toed boots, work gloves, and like kitchen rubber gloves that came up long. They were kind of heavy duty, but something that you'd wear to clean the car or work in the kitchen. There were no respirators, goggles, special clothing coverings like Tyvek or hazmat suits, or decontamination stations. I had 2 pairs of Bureau-issued steel-toed boots with me, one pair that was very uncomfortable but waterproof, and another pair of more comfortable ones that were not waterproof. So one clear memory I have is of walking through the Pentagon from the outer ring to the inside of the C ring to search for evidence near where the nose of the plane had come to rest. The boots I had on that day were not the waterproof ones, and they were soaked through to my skin with contaminated water and mud. We wore the long rubber gloves, but even so, the water seeped over them as we reached in the water looking for possible evidence, shiny things, anything that looked interesting. We leaned down over the water, breathing through our masks close to the water to reach for items underneath. Of course, the water and mud contained all sorts of toxins, including, but not limited to, airline fuel and chemicals, dust, debris, and asbestos from the building, and human remains. I disposed of the boots I wore that day and acknowledged to myself that this could not be good for my health, but we had a job to do. So I put those thoughts aside and told myself to be more careful. Another day or so later, we finally had white Tyvek suits, masks with pink respirators on the sides, and high yellow rubber boots, in addition to hard hats, eye coverings, and heavy-duty gloves. I was a team leader twice, leading our ERT personnel up to the second floor of the building, which had been somewhat shored up by the contractors, to collect the remains of 2 victims discovered there by the workers securing the building. We walked the remains out of the Pentagon in body bags and over to the temporary mortuary, stopping at the valuables desk to enter the wedding rings found with these remains into evidence. Shortly after bringing out the second body, we were told the second floor where we had just been had collapsed. It was a very dangerous environment. The human remains, we discovered, were always treated with reverence. They were ceremoniously escorted from the Pentagon to the temporary morgue. People stopped what they were doing and watched us go with our body bags or our red hazmat bags. Then again from the morgue to be transported to Dover Air Force Base for identification, and more ceremony when carried into the Air Force Base facility. It was really quite something. In general, most of us removed our masks or respirators when we weren't working inside the building, like when we were in the ERT tent area or coming and going from the scene. And I can't stress enough that the air we were exposed to and inhaled anywhere near the Pentagon, to include at the hotel in Roslyn, was toxic. None of us understood the potential, serious, long-term effects of breathing in that air. We knew it couldn't be good for us, but I don't remember anyone really talking about it. The toxins would not only affect first responders, but the people who lived and worked in the areas at all 3 crash sites. And I recently learned that people that worked in the part of the Pentagon that was still standing, they all reported back to work on the 12th of September. I had a break for a couple days, and I worked back at the office around the 16th, and then I was redeployed to Dover Air Force Base. I was there for 2 to 3 weeks, assisting in processing human remains through an X-ray, dental, and general exam, and sorting personal belongings and secured valuables. These remains and personal effects were covered in dust from the buildings and fires and fuel and chemicals from the planes, depending on their origin. Logic tells me we wore masks and gloves, but I don't remember wearing any other protection. Sometime later in the fall, after 9/11, after returning from Dover, I came down with a double ear, upper respiratory, and sinus infection, most certainly related to the air quality and exposure. Talked to others since who came down with the same thing. It was a really tough infection and took a few rounds of antibiotics to get rid of it. And at the time, I was thinking this would be the only physical ailment I would suffer due to my time working the 9/11 scene. If only I knew what was to come. Flash forward to 2016. I was on the surveillance squad in Baltimore and was experiencing severe back pain, which I attributed to having been rear-ended in a car crash during the fall of 2015. But no matter how much pain and anti-inflammatory medication I took, how many cortisone shots or physical therapy sessions I completed, the pain would not go away. By the fall of 2016, I was also experiencing severe fatigue and weight loss, which I rationalized as being due to the shift work on the surveillance squad and a diet I had started in the summer. I had excuses for all of it and ignored the possibility that it could be due to something more serious. Early in December 2016, I experienced horrible stomach aches several nights in a row. Again, an excuse. I thought these were a sign of a possible ulcer from the anti-inflammatory medication I had been taking for my back pain. Luckily, my annual physical was scheduled that week, and I spoke to my doctor about all of this. We did some blood work, and she sent me home. 2 days later, she called to tell me that the blood work showed I had both pancreatitis and kidney failure. She insisted I go to the hospital emergency room immediately, and I actually fought back. I got 2 kids to take care of, I had a job to do, I had a house to take care of, but she absolutely insisted. And so my neighbor drove me to Howard County Hospital that afternoon. I won't get all into the weeds about all the procedures and tests I endured before getting the correct diagnosis, but it took over a month. After the first emergency visit and hospital stay, pancreatic cancer, which is what the doctors had been focused on, was ruled out. Thank goodness. Following that, there was still one failed procedure to get an ultrasound with contrast done on my kidneys and pancreas. 3 visits to an urgent care for fluids and blood work, which revealed the pancreas healing, but the kidneys continuing to fail. And then there was the second hospital room, emergency room visit. During that second stay, a kidney biopsy was finally done, resulting in the discovery of an abnormality in my kidneys called light chains. The nephrologist explained this meant one of 2 possible things. One, I could have something called amyloidosis, which is literally a sticky substance called amyloid that builds up in the organs. In my case, it would have been the kidneys, and it causes them to fail. Or 2, multiple myeloma, a complex blood cancer that creates amyloid, which can attack the kidneys, the bones, or the heart. I had never heard of either one, so I did what anybody would do. I Googled them. What came up was not only the scientific and symptomatic information about each, but also a plethora of articles related to the many 9/11 first responders being diagnosed with multiple myeloma. So the pieces for me began to fall into place. To confirm the diagnosis, I had a bone marrow biopsy. This procedure is done without anesthesia and is the single most painful procedure I have ever endured. A long needle is inserted into the hip area down to the bone to extract bone and bone marrow. It's excruciating, but thankfully it's also a short procedure. Since then, I've endured it 2 more times. As you can guess, the results confirm the multiple myeloma diagnosis. So for you medical types, let me tell you a little bit about multiple myeloma. It is one of 3 blood cancers, along with leukemia and lymphoma. Most people have heard of those 2. It is a rare cancer of the plasma cells where malignant plasma cells multiply in the bone marrow, crowding out the normal ones that help to fight infection. The malignant cells then produce an abnormal antibody called M protein, which may cause tumors, kidney damage, bone lesions, compression fractures, and low immunity. Each case of myeloma is unique, thus its name multiple myeloma. Causes are mostly unknown, though statistics show it is most prevalent in men over the age of 60. Research indicates that benzene, such as that found in jet fuel, as well as other similar chemicals found in Agent Orange used in Vietnam, can be a catalyst for this cancer. Following exposure, it can take years to develop, and diagnosis can be challenging as it's so rare and symptoms differ from person to person. I started chemotherapy right away by mid-January 2017. The weekly regimen I was put on consisted of a cocktail of 3 drugs, including an injection of 1 in my stomach. The side effects included neuropathy in my hands and feet, forgetfulness, sleeplessness, itchiness, low immunity, chills, and occasional tremors. I never lost my hair, but its texture completely changed. Unfortunately, the chemotherapy was not started in time due to the late diagnosis to stop the kidney failure, as we had hoped. Dialysis was started in February 2017. From that time until August 2017, I went to a dialysis center 3 times a week, 4 to 5 hours each time, for hemodialysis. This is the standard treatment most of you have heard about for dialysis, and in the standard treatment time that anyone on hemodialysis would experience. It was exhausting, and I often did not feel well afterward. In the beginning, friends had to drive me to the treatments as I wasn't well enough to drive myself. I would usually sleep for the rest of the afternoon, and I was too tired to do anything on the days I had dialysis. I had a port in my shoulder, which was painful and had to be meticulously cared for to keep from getting infected. In August 2017, I learned how to do something called peritoneal dialysis, or PD, which I could do at home. The port in my shoulder was removed, and a PD catheter, which is a tube, was installed, connected to the peritoneal lining in my belly. I then began a PD dialysis regimen for 14 hours every night. 10 of those hours I was hooked up to a machine called a cycler while I slept, which pushed dialysate fluid into my peritoneal lining and then extracted it after a couple of hours. It did this about 4 to 5 times through the course of the night, taking with it the toxins healthy kidneys normally would process. Then, for 4 more hours each morning, because I needed a little bit of extra dialysis, I could disconnect myself from the cycler, but I was still filled with the fluid until I manually drained it several hours later. With the PD, I felt a lot better than I had when I was on hemodialysis, but there were a lot of restrictions. Every night and every morning, I had to take time to meticulously hook myself up or unhook myself from the cycler. I could not go anywhere early in the morning unless I hooked myself up early the evening before. I could not work a full day. I could not travel freely, and I had to plan my days around dialysis timing. My clothing size changed several times due at first to extreme weight loss and then gaining a round belly from the dialysis. I developed a hernia caused by PD, which had to be surgically repaired. My balance was off due to the residual fluid in my belly. When I was hooked up, I could only walk as far as the tubes I was hooked up to allowed. I could not go to my children if they needed me. I could not go anywhere quickly in an emergency. The changes in the pressure in my belly occasionally caused me to throw up. But I was alive, and I was determined to stay that way until a better treatment presented itself. Humor is important to me, even if I'm the only one laughing at my jokes, and my family will tell you this, as they often don't really laugh too much at me. But I finally named my cycler Charlotte, from Charlotte's Web, as she weaved a little web of fluid through a bunch of tubes to keep me alive, just like Charlotte weaved her special spider webs to help keep Wilbur alive. So I guess that makes me Wilbur. You can laugh, it's okay. Tough audience. Prior to this diagnosis of multiple myeloma and kidney failure, I was a full-time FBI agent, successfully running a busy household with my husband and 2 young children. I was able to do anything for exercise. I jogged, biked, swam, golfed, lifted weights, and I skied for exercise. I could vacation easily, and we could go anywhere. After the diagnosis, I continued to experience severe ongoing fatigue from anemia. I had to plan my time around doctor's appointments and dialysis. I took over 10 prescription medications daily. I had to follow a special diet for kidney failure: low salt, limited fluids, no alcohol, not a fun diet. Minimum potassium, like no bananas, oranges, tomatoes, or potatoes, including potato chips and French fries, no fun. Limited phosphorus, which is in all dairy and processed foods like ice cream, chocolate, pizza, and frozen prepared foods. Since I was unable to work a full day, I finally retired from the Bureau in December of 2019 after 23 years. I was not able to travel to see my kids play soccer, visit colleges with my teenage daughter, or easily take a vacation. The hospitalizations were difficult on my family. As I mentioned, I was in the hospital already twice for several days, each time before even getting the diagnosis. Again, to install the port in my shoulder for hemodialysis, and again to remove that, and again for a migraine that lasted a week. Again to adjust the dialysis, and another time for hematoma on my spleen after someone collided into me while I was attempting to ski with my daughter, and I couldn't even get up by myself from the fall. As time went by, I grew weaker until simply walking up the stairs was a challenge. Somewhere in there, I also tried to ride my bike, never giving up, something I had done a lot in the past, but I could not keep my balance. So after falling several times, bruising myself up pretty badly, I angrily put the bike away, thinking I would probably never get back on it. I got shots of Epogen in my stomach approximately every 2 weeks for anemia, and eventually I could give these shots to myself when I needed them. I had at least 5 blood transfusions. All right, so I'm not telling you all of these things to have you feel sorry for me. Please do not feel sorry for me. These are just the facts of what life was like. And while it all sounds pretty depressing, it was around this time that I started realizing that I was actually pretty badass. I could give myself shots in the stomach. How many of you could do that? In order to get off of dialysis, and I wanted to get off of dialysis, I needed to have a kidney transplant. While doctors said I was a good candidate for this surgery, they had rules. Most said the standard waiting time is 5 years in remission. At 3 years on dialysis, 2.5 years in remission, I didn't really like that answer. And so instead of going along with, at this point, what I thought were just the doctor's opinions, I began to take things into my own hands. 2 local hospitals held the stance that I would not qualify for a kidney transplant until being in remission for 5 years. The Victim Compensation Fund, one of the national programs that assists victims from 9/11, finally came through with a payout for me, so I could afford to go to Sloan Kettering in New York to see some specialists. After spending a week up there, having numerous tests and meeting with multiple doctors, the specialist concluded that I was in a very good remission. I was healthy enough otherwise, and there should be no reason why I could not have a kidney transplant as soon as a match was found. While this was music to my ears, even with the payout, I couldn't figure out how was I going to stay in New York for the required 3 months following a kidney transplant in order to adhere to all of the health and testing regimens. So I circled back to Johns Hopkins. I had initially ruled them out after learning they generally did not accept the World Trade Center Health Program insurance, another national program available to assist 9/11 illness victims with healthcare costs. But after an initial consultation, Hopkins doctors agreed with doctors in New York and said they would give me a kidney transplant as soon as a match was found. A few phone calls later, the World Trade Center Health Program agreed to write a contract for me to have the transplant at Hopkins. My point is, no matter what you're going through, do not give up. I had won this battle because I didn't give up. So next I had to find a kidney. I had met a kind doctor at one of the other hospitals who made a video with me requesting a live donor. I put this on Facebook. Within a short time, I had a donor, a dear friend and sorority sister from college. Unfortunately, she was not a match for me, so we had to wait to find what is called a paired match. In less than a month, the perfect match was found. And we recently discovered that we were actually part of a lengthy chain of paired matches that resulted in a number of successful transplants in a day. I don't know how many, but I understand it's quite a few. That technology exists to map out so many matching donors with recipients at once, resulting in so many successful transplants at once, is really amazing to me, and another victory. I had a kidney transplant surgery on January 28th, 2021. 4 years since my multiple myeloma diagnosis, just shy of 4 years since I had started dialysis, and 3.5 years since achieving remission. The kidney transplant was a success. Here I am. And though recovery was initially very painful, this passed and I feel better every day. I try to regularly meet new milestones, starting with simple things like laundry, walking on an elliptical, then lifting some light weights and walking outside, then adding in some running, feeling kind of like Tim Conway's old man from the Carol Burnett Show, for those of you who are old enough to remember. I've played some golf, and I've been in a swimming pool and swam for the first time in 4 years. In July, I got on a bike, and I rode for miles without falling. And I will ski this winter with my family. So you get the idea. I've come a long way since 9/11, a cancer diagnosis, kidney failure, dialysis, and a transplant. I have some limitations now, but they are nowhere near what they were, so I'm not complaining, but I'm going to explain a little. Post-transplant, I took about 15 different kinds of medications. I'm now down to 7 medications, prescription medications, for the rest of my life. I currently get blood work done bi-weekly, but by the end of the year, I will have blood work done monthly for the rest of my life. I cannot ever eat from a buffet. I cannot ever go on a cruise. I cannot be in a large crowd, such as in malls or stores during peak hours. I cannot ever swim in creeks, rivers, or lakes, and I have to be careful of the ocean due to the potential for bacteria in any of these bodies of water. Speaking of water, I have to drink treated water, never tap or spring water, even if from a bottle. So I got some Brita pitchers, and I carry my pink water bottle around everywhere. I got it with me tonight. I have to drink about 2 liters of water a day. I'm not allowed to take any over-the-counter medications except for Tylenol without approval from my doctors. I've had 3 doses of the Pfizer COVID vaccine. After the second one, an antibody test revealed I had no resulting antibodies for COVID, none. So So I got the booster this past Thursday, but I won't have another antibody test. I just have to be extra careful. But don't we all in this day and age of COVID? Over the past 20 years, 18 FBI employees, agents and support employees, have been added to the FBI Wall of Honor because of 9/11. One was in the towers saving people when they collapsed. The other 17 have died from illnesses related to 9/11 exposure. 3 of them, also diagnosed with multiple myeloma, were at the Pentagon the same time I was. They're on the Wall of Honor. They passed away. So here are 2 of their stories. Special Agent Wes Yu was the first FBI employee to be diagnosed with multiple myeloma in 2005. He initially presented with severe anemia and kidney failure, but was not diagnosed quickly, as I've explained is typical of myeloma patients. Wes was 35 years old and Asian, an almost unheard of combination for a myeloma diagnosis. After diagnosis, he was put on chemotherapy and dialysis. The treatments initially worked, and he achieved partial remission. His kidney function actually came back, and he was able to stop dialysis. However, the cancer returned, and over a 10-year period, Wes beat that cancer into partial remission several times. He had the chemotherapy regimen. Then he had 3 stem cell transplants, 2 with his own stem cells, and 1 with his sister's stem cells. He received treatment from a myeloma specialty clinic in Seattle. He experienced the kidney failure, bone lesions, and amyloid in his heart before succumbing to an aneurysm in his brain in 2015. He was at work the day before he passed away, and he had been determined to survive. Wes and his wife Grace's children, 2 children, are beneficiaries of the FBI Agents Association Memorial College Fund, a charity you can donate to if you so choose. The second story. Special Agent Bob Roth presented with symptoms in September of 2006. After experiencing hip pain when running, an MRI revealed he had multiple bone lesions and basically no hip joint at all. Even though bone lesions are another known symptom of multiple myeloma, due to his young age, he was also misdiagnosed and actually had a hip replacement before doctors realized that his blood work had not improved, and finally the multiple myeloma diagnosis was made at the end of October in 2006. Bob was put on chemotherapy and was able to get into remission for 8 months after the diagnosis. But treatments at a specialty clinic in Little Rock were unable to save him once the cancer returned. He lived for 18 months after the initial diagnosis. His wife, Tressa, and their 5 children, also recipients of the FBI Agents Association Memorial College Scholarship Fund, are grateful for the 8 months of remission that they had with their husband and dad. These men were warriors. Their wives and their families are extraordinary. Tressa and Grace are my friends and my inspiration. But I wish they hadn't had to go through any of this. I don't know why I'm still here and Bob and Wes aren't. I try not to think about it too much, but I do know that since I'm still here, maybe it's for a reason. And if you don't believe in that philosophy, then let me put it a different way. I'm going to make a reason. During the last few years, I have been participating in a local myeloma support group. Through this connection, I've discovered a charity called Moving Mountains for Multiple Myeloma. It will be my privilege and honor to join with this charity to kick off my own fundraising campaign to find a cure for multiple myeloma in remembrance of Bob, Wes, other first responders from 9/11 who have lost their lives to this cancer, and those who are fighting it or in remission, or those who have yet to be diagnosed. I have already begun to train for a sponsored trip by the charity for my 18-year-old daughter and I, along with other patients, caregivers, doctors, nurses, and medical researchers, to literally climb a mountain. Past trips have included Mount Everest Base Camp, Machu Picchu, Mount Kilimanjaro, or hiking the rough terrain of Iceland. Myeloma survivors do these difficult treks to demonstrate the resilience of and inspire those who are alive and fighting this cancer. For me, going from where I've been to climbing a mountain as a multiple myeloma patient will be the ultimate inspiration for those battling this cancer, for their caregivers, and maybe just for anyone having a bad day. I'm not sure if I've emphasized enough that there is no cure for multiple myeloma. I am only in remission. I live every day knowing this cancer will likely come back, maybe next year, maybe in 20 years. I don't know when, so I live every day to the fullest and with the hope that by the time it returns, there will be a cure, and maybe I will have had something to do with finding that cure. Once my daughter and I choose and are accepted for a trek to climb, we will launch our fundraising campaign. We will be looking for any and all donations, small and large, corporate matching, corporate sponsorships, ideas for mini fundraisers, contacts to meet and help in other ways. If any of you want to be part of this, for first responders fighting this cancer, or for someone you know fighting this cancer, please talk to me this evening. Our goal is to raise $20,000 to $25,000. Every penny of that will go to find a cure. Every year there are remembrances for those who died on 9/11. Typically the focus is on the people killed on that one day, and I would never ever minimize that. But this year, on the 20th anniversary, please also remember the many who have died or are currently suffering from rare, complicated, painful, and sometimes multiple illnesses because of their service, or because of where they lived and worked during the months following 9/11. Some are just being diagnosed, and many have yet to be diagnosed. I want you to be aware of this aspect of 9/11. World Trade Center Health Program and CDC statistics indicate that more people have died from 9/11 related illnesses to date than were killed on that one day. And that only counts the people who have reported their illnesses or who have joined the World Trade Center Health Program. There are so many more who are sick and who don't know that it's because of 9/11. Those terrorists are still killing us 20 years later, and the illnesses and deaths will continue throughout the rest of our generation. Ending on a positive note, I want to emphasize that I am at peace with my life. As long as I can inspire others, make a positive difference in this world, maybe raise some funds for the FBI Agents Association Memorial College Fund, help to find a cure for cancer through moving mountains for multiple myeloma, foster kittens for Animal Allies Rescue Foundation, or just successfully navigate my family through COVID, I will be happy. Praying for peace in the world is part of my daily routine. Someday I hope we will achieve it. Those of us with 9/11 illnesses are fighting back every day in our own ways. We are grateful to be alive. We have hope for cures in the future, and each day of our life, for us, feels like a triumph over those stupid terrorists. A special thanks to the first responders, my brothers and sisters, for all the work you do to keep this nation safe. And thank you all for your time and attention to my story. I hope you have a nice and a safe weekend.
Lauren, on behalf of a grateful audience, please accept this.
Thank you, Dave. I can't thank you enough. for having dinner.
One of the tremendous positives that came out of the terrible events of 9/11 was a huge increase in volunteerism. To volunteer for something beneficial in your community is rewarding. No matter how big or how small, the benefits of helping, there's a satisfaction, a camaraderie, and a bond that you won't find any other way. I encourage you to find an organization that appeals to you and to volunteer. One of Harford County's best volunteers, Mr. Ron Solid, is a great friend of the Darlington Volunteer Fire Department. I'd like to ask him for it.
Thank you, Dave. I don't know what to say. I don't know about that, what he said, but I do want to reflect on a couple things before I get into it. Most of you know me through the fire service, as a fire prevention specialist and instructor. But some of you don't know that I'm also a retired staff sergeant from the United States Army for 27 years of service. During that time, in 9/11, well, I'll go back to 9/10. Let's go to October 10th. I was in a unit that did inspections of other units. We had just come back on the 10th from an inspection in a unit in Connecticut. We flew over the towers, about 25,000 feet. It was neat to see New York and the towers and the Statue of Liberty from that height. Came home, we did our thing, come into work the next morning, 9/11. We're in there at 6:30. The commanders gets us all together, gives us our brief, tells them what he expects of us for the day's actions. Little did he know what was coming. Made the coffee like I usually do, because everybody says I make the best coffee. I don't know what the difference is, but anyway. Went back to my room after the briefing, turned my radio on, get my computer set up, and I heard nothing but silence. It was my favorite radio station, WQSR, those of you that can remember. Very good with the oldies and very comical in the morning. They really helped me get started during the day. And then I heard Steve Rouse say, a plane has flown in to the World Trade Center. Immediately we thought, okay, a small plane got off course, somebody had a medical emergency, which happens, and it went in. So of course at that point I turned on the TV that was in my office and saw what was going on, saw it was much larger than a Cessna. I knocked on the colonel's door, he was doing a staff briefing. Colonel says, this better be important, Sergeant Solid. I said, sir, it's important. Turn on your TV. I said, a plane just went into one of the towers in New York. Turned on the TV. Just as we turned on the TV, the second plane came in. Beautiful visual of disaster that I'll never forget. I couldn't tell you what I ate yesterday for breakfast, but I can tell you this. I remember that day right to this moment. After that time, of course, things were happening. Then, of course, the plane went into the Pentagon. And that's another story. I have a special story about that one. Then, of course, the one in Shanksville. My colonel was given a call from officials at the Pentagon asking him to stand up some air traffic controllers because all the air traffic and safety systems were now down around D.C. and the Pentagon area. All planes, as you know, were ordered to land at the safest location that they could land in that would take the weight of their aircraft. We were told to stand up air traffic control units. They needed at least 3 units to take care of the airspace around the Capitol and around D.C. We called into Louisiana, where most of our units had been transferred to. My previous unit was transferred down to Louisiana. They were air traffic controllers. We were active during Desert Shield and Desert Storm. And then the colonel said, wait a minute, we've got assets right here at Aberdeen Proving Ground. We could get them over there in a shorter amount of time than having units drive up from Louisiana. With that, I got on the phone with several other people in the office. We started calling out air traffic controllers. Within 2 hours, we had units on their way to D.C. to start set up. air traffic control and to control the airspace around the Pentagon and DC. Another special thing on that day, good friend of mine, my commander during Desert Shield, Desert Storm, was Captain Bill Ruth. He was a man, a teacher in Baltimore County, very friendly, very outgoing man, a friend to all, even though he was our commander. And you have to understand, when I talk about Bill and some of the other people in my unit at that time, we were in a unit that was half officers and half enlisted. Okay, it was very evenly split. Usually you don't see enlisted and officers acting together most of the time. It's very rare in the military. Our units were very cohesive. We all were together. When we went to Desert Storm, officers had to drive vehicles, which is basically unheard of. Officers had to help the enlisted unload the vehicles. You know, we're unloading kitchens, everything we had to unload at our campsite. That day was a special day for Captain Bill Ruth, our commander. It was his first day on the job at the Pentagon. His office and his conference room was right there on that side of the building. The plane went right into where he was having a meeting. While everything was burning, at this time, I have to tell you that, and some of you don't know, in the military, officers, if you don't get promoted to the next rank in a certain amount of time, they can convert back to like a warrant officer, okay, which is an officer, but so he could still fly. His love for flying helicopters was amazing, and his love for people. So he was a chief warrant officer at that time, 57 years old. The reports have it that he crawled on his stomach because he heard people yelling to get people out of the building, so he went to help. Before he could go out of the building, instead of going out a safe way where he knew the way out, Bill went to help others. He was never seen again. Meanwhile, in Morgantown, West Virginia, one of his sons, Sean, was 20 years old. He was in the West Virginia National Guard. He had just come home from a scuba diving trip. Tried to call his dad several times, got no answer. He kept calling, got his voicemail, kept leaving messages. He was a military casualty officer, or CAO, casualty assistance officer for the military, was assigned to him, and keep him updated as the days and weeks and months went on while they were getting the building straightened up and getting people out. He went to bed that night, obviously couldn't sleep. None of us could, actually. And about 2 weeks later, he received a call. His dad's body had been recovered in a room, basically unidentifiable. It was identified through his medical records. What's funny about this, he recalled, Sean had told us, and I knew his son Sean and his other son Chad, because he was in the Maryland National Guard. His last comments to his dad was, "You need to cut your fishing trip short to Canada. I'm being installed as the commander of my VFW. Post 1076 in Mount Airy, Maryland on Monday, September 10th. Because of the love for the VFW and his family members, of course, he was not there, but he was very surprised to get what he did. Bill kept our company together. We had many Scud alerts. Obviously, we all came back. We had one miscommunication that can tell you how rumors start, that our unit had been hit with one of the Scuds that came into the building. It wasn't our unit. It was actually a unit from Pennsylvania, unfortunately. But it got back that we were going, and we had people, our families were panicking. When I retired, a few years later, I'll never forget Bill, and of course, he's got a remembrance at the military reservation up in Reisterstown, the Camp Frederick, on a memorial there for him. That being said, I spent a lot of years in the military. I've spent over 31 years with the fire service now, and most of it has been during fire safety and fire prevention, teaching to children, teaching to adults the right thing to do. Sometimes it's harder than others, and I see a lot of young people in here. Many of you were not alive in 2001 when all this happened. It's just a memory. To me, it's etched in my memory, and believe me, I still have nightmares. Scuds coming overhead, coming over and exploding over top of us. What they were actually going to is actually trying to shoot the oil fields that were about 5 miles from us. So very heartening. That's all I'm going to talk about. Obviously, I'm getting too emotional to really continue about it, but just remember that there's a lot of people that were affected by this with the wildfires, and like the Asian said, you know, the kerosene, fuel, nothing is sacred anymore. What I wanted to do now is, before we light our candles, give you a little bit of safety about fire candles. But I want you to know, just to let you know, in your homes, did you know that 15,600 fires are started by candles every year in the United States? 150 people die, and 1,270 injuries each year. These are statistics from the NFPA, which is National Fire Protection Association, and they compile these statistics. Candles are dangerous. We're getting into a season now where you're probably using candles for the holidays, different things around that are flammable. Please be careful with them. As you would any other flammable, keep anything combustible at least 3 feet from your candles. And one of the common factors in fatal candles is more than half of them, the fires start when they think something can't burn, or people fall asleep, or they leave the room and the candle breaks, whatever. Especially these cheap candles you get from the dollar store. They smell nice, but the glass can break in an instant. Right now, you all have candles. What we're going to do is have,
In a minute when I introduce you.
in a minute, Dave's going to tell us. They're going to grab the candle. We're going to light the candles in the people in the center rows. We'll hold your candle out. You are going to continue to light the candles next to you. You're sharing the light. You're sharing the peace of everything that has happened. It should look like a nice glow as we go back. Just be careful with it. Do not tilt the candle more than you have to. Watch out for the hot wax, and be careful of the paper cups to keep the candles on you. With that, I thank you all for coming. God bless you all.
Thank you, Ron. Martin Luther King, one of my heroes, once said, "Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only the light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Let us drive out the darkness together by sharing the light from our peace candle." I'd like to recall Susan Fisher to share the light. I would ask each person that can to please stand as we share the light for the last parts of our remembrance. As the light is being shared, I'd also like to call forward Mr. Matt Kinnicky, a great friend of the Darlington Volunteer Fire Department, who will now be leading us in song. The lyrics are in your program.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the ocean, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Matt. Mother Teresa once said, "Peace begins with a smile." We can all spread peace in that very way. I'd now like to call on Mr. Dave Graham, chaplain for the Harford County Fire and EMS Association, to lead us in our closing prayer.
God is the author of peace. Receive his blessing tonight. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance to you and give you peace. Go in God's peace.
Thank you, Dave. Gandhi once said, "You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist." Let us be more like that wise man. I'd like to thank two very special people for tonight's program. You won't find their names in the program under thank yous. Teresa Borden has done 1,000 things behind the scenes to make this work. And to the best niece anyone could ask for, Jenny Weiser, for keeping me straight, online, and offering her encouragement. I'd now like to recall the Harford County Honor Guard to retire the colors.
Honor guard, attention! Forward, march! Detail, halt, left face, present arm, order arm, prepare to retrieve colors, retrieve, colors, right face, forward, march.
Thank you. Fred Rogers once said, and he's one of my all-time heroes, when I was a boy and would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will find people who are helping. To this day, especially in times of disaster, I remember my mother's words, and I'm always comforted by realizing there are so many caring people in this world. Fred Rogers, otherwise known as Mr. Rogers. At the conclusion of tonight's program, there are free refreshments over on the side. Please help yourself. If you would like to keep your peace candle, you may. If you would like to return it, please see one of the cadets over here by the steel beam. The memorial is open outside. It has a piece of steel from the World Trade Centers. You're welcome to spend moments, and if you would like to touch the steel, you may. All of those that participated in the program this evening, as a reminder, if you could gather up front for a group photograph. And so we will now end with the conclusion. In a time-honored fire department tradition, I would like to honor or introduce Mr. Jeff Douglas, a world-class bagpiper. May peace be with you.